Everyone. My name is Farhan Ahmad and I'm a lecturer at DHA Sufa University, Karachi. And today we'll be discussing business communication. This is our sixth lecture and I have decided to discuss barriers to business communication today. So let's see how do we go about this topic. If you remember, in the previous class we had covered something called principles of business communication, in which we had discussed about 9 C's of communication. So if I was to recall you what we have done in the previous class, we had made sure that as a good business manager, you will be spending 60 to 80% of your time doing business communication throughout the day. You'll be talking to the people, you'll be making presentations, you'll be holding meetings, you'll be taking phone calls, you'll be writing emails, you'll be doing video conferencing, you'll be texting messages. So there is a range of communication events that you have to engage into every single day when you're working in a corporate world. So that's something we have decided that yes, as a business manager, a good manager spends maximum time in communicating with different stakeholders at the company. So that's what we have discussed. And when we are discussing business communication, we understand the purpose of business communication is to sort of inform, educate, persuade, and entertain. So we understand these are the primary purposes of business communication. So as a manager or anyone who is working in the company, it's your job to ensure that you actually inform the people, you educate them, you entertain them, and you also persuade them. So we'll look into this, how does it work. But we made sure in the previous class that we understand that there are some principles of communication that makes communication process successful. And those principles that we had discussed in the previous class were principles of completeness, clarity, conciseness, correctness, okay, so we discuss concreteness, we also discuss confidence, courtesy, let's put courtesy here, consideration, conversational tone, and confidence. So these were the 9 principles that we had agreed upon in the previous class that make your communication complete, effective, efficient, and viable. Okay? So when we are implementing or applying these principles, your communication becomes more and more effective and you are able to have successful communication event. So when we discuss the barriers to communication, this is where it becomes a bit tricky, because no matter what you do, there will be some form of barriers in the communication process. One way or the other, you will encounter some form of barrier. And as a good manager, you must have a very sound understanding of what barriers are and what type of barriers you can come across, so that you can take preemptive measures to remove those barriers and make sure that your communication process is flawless, impeccable, and viable. So let's discuss the very first barrier that you can actually encounter. That's the physical barrier. It is highly likely that you might be working in a building where you don't have the provision of the technology, and the person that you want to communicate to, he might be sitting in other part of the building and there's a massive physical barrier. Maybe there are walls, maybe there are different sections, and it's hard to get by, it's hard to approach him, and maybe you want to get up and go and visit him, but how many times can you do that? Similarly, as we understand physical barrier, your employees may be sitting in different part of the world. As we understand, due to globalization, many of the multinational companies, they have opened their branches in the third world country, they have opened subsidiaries or production plants. So if you talk about production plants and your employees are working there in a different part of the world, how would you approach them? And even if you approach them, there's very little potential that you can do proper management because they're far away from your eyes. Yes, technology has made it easier to make the communication process more facile, but we want to understand still physical barrier is one such barrier that can make your job as a manager difficult, and you want to remove this barrier. How do you remove this barrier? Of course, you want to come up with the technology, something that is suitable to your organization and to your workforce and to your requirements. Then comes personal barrier. So yes, physical barrier is one such thing, but personal barrier is another thing that is very common nowadays. So some people, they are very angry people, they have got very high temperament, they have got, maybe they are not too talkative, maybe they don't like to talk to everyone, and yes, there are people who are introvert, and that could be a personal barrier. It's very hard to approach these people. They are not so approachable or accessible. So your manager might be one such person that who is not easy to to be approached. Like he's not too interactive, he's not too talkative, he doesn't want people around. So that can happen. And as a good manager, you should not have these type of personal barriers. Well, everyone does have some form of personal barrier, but this one you want to make sure that you are more of a people's person. You're more of a person that who is easy to be approached and who is accessible and approachable, and you're amiable, friendly, and amenable to some extent, so that you can sort of get by other types of people. So yes, so that will be very important, because some people in a diverse work environment might have some personal barriers. They might not like to eat with you, they might not like to, it gets into the religious barrier, but let's just put it there. And comes the language barrier. We understand we live in a world where a large number of languages are dying off, the languages are becoming extinct, but but still we have got a we have got huge number of languages which are still active, apart from English, which is the international language. So we understand, yes, language barrier, which is also known as semantic barrier. If someone is talking something in foreign language and you're unable to understand that, that can be a big barrier for you. So I always recommend and suggest my students to make sure that when you're in a cross-cultural interaction, when you're in a multicultural environment, a diverse environment, try to utilize English so that other people don't feel uncomfortable and they do not sort of like misunderstand you. So that's language barrier. Superior versus subordinate. So sometimes you have a barrier approaching your superior. You feel that, okay, I cannot approach him. He's, as I mentioned earlier, he's not approachable or accessible. So that could be barrier. Like sometimes you're scared. You're scared to sort of voice your concern. You're scared to escalate your matter. And it happens with me. Sometimes CR wants to bring any issue to me, and that CR has to get everything signed by all the students, and they maybe slide the paper underneath my door. It can happen. If they feel that, yes, the manager is not too helpful, if manager is too strict, that can happen. And I've come across this situation, although I've never mentioned that, see, this is what I want. But people, when they want to come up with some tricky ideas or tricky requests, they might resort to this type of thing. So they will create some kind of barrier to show or to seek your flexibility, to sort of like leverage this thing to get some concession. So that could be another barrier. And then comes relationship. We live in cultures around the world where relationships can become a barrier. So in my country, yes, sometimes relationship can be a barrier. In some other parts of the world, yes, daughter might not be able to express everything to the male members of the family, or male person of the family might not be able to share everything openly with the female members of the family. So that could be a barrier. Relationship can be a barrier where you do not feel easygoing with your relationship and talking about all the things in the world. And we have to break this barrier to encourage and to build the confidence in our offsprings or in our new generation. Organizational structure, of course, if it is too hierarchical, if there is a long hierarchy, that could be a big barrier, organizational structure. So the information flowing from the top to the bottom might be very time-taking process, and it will become a barrier for the sort of like for the employees. So you want to make sure that you move from vertical organization to horizontal organization. You want to make sure that there is very less number of hierarchy, or even if there are, there should be one window operation, a very transparent operation where everyone can see everything, and technology can become it can play a very critical role, a crucial role to sort of like reduce this organizational barrier. Inadequate attention, again, if someone is not paying much attention to you, and this can happen especially over the phone calls when angry customers are calling you and they're wanting to get their issues resolved. You're providing them the information, but somehow they are not paying attention to what you're saying, they don't listen to you, and this can cause a big barrier. So that's again inadequate attention. It could be from anyone, it could be from a manager, it could be from, I'm so sorry, there's a bit of a shade here. This is called premature evaluation. So premature evaluation, I can write on the top here, because I can see my room is designed in a way where the light is striking the board is straight up here. Premature evaluation. So sometimes when customers are calling you, or if you're wanting to talk to your manager about anything and they prematurely evaluate you, they go, this is what you're wanting. Instead of listening to you completely, instead of paying attention to your concern, if they come up with premeditated sort of like an assumption, that can be a barrier, and you will be like, man, I did not even want to say this thing, but he's not understanding me. So yeah, that will cause a barrier. So always listen to people, try to process the information successfully, then try to come up with the suitable answer. Then comes emotional attitude, and that is also a barrier. Some people can break down quickly and they can start crying, they can lose their emotions. Some people get excited very quickly, some people get pauses all the time, some people get they can get put off easily. So this is another thing if you're a salesperson, especially, and well, in general this is a big barrier. But if you're in sales and you have emotional attitude where you are very susceptible, you're vulnerable kind of person, so you're vulnerable in a way that you can lose your emotions very quickly, so that can be a huge challenge for you. It will be a very difficult journey to navigate. Resistance to change, as you understand, nothing is permanent but change is coming into our society, in our external environment, be it environmental changes, be it economic changes, be it social, be it political. And when we try and implement the change into the organization, be it technology, be it system, be it structure, be it strategy, be it staff, be it skills, be it shared values, any of the areas, people will resist. And there will be people who will accept and welcome change. There will be people who will reject change. And there will be people in the middle who will say that yes, okay, change is coming and we have to embrace it. So we understand there will be three types of people when resistance to change is concerned. And good managers employ change process model and different tools and techniques, ADKA model, Kurt-Lewin model, to try and implement the change effectively. But yes, bringing change is the ultimate test of your leadership. Yeah, so you will face some kind of resistance when trying to implement the change, and that's something you have to consider, that yes, it is also a barrier. So as we understand that according to John Cotter, 60% of the change efforts fail, and they fail because of various reasons, because the communication process was not done properly, goals were not clear, maybe there were other factors, maybe they did not analyze the situation before implementing the change. So you want to understand this thing, that can be a barrier, and you have to convince people. So excuse me, lack of mutual trust deficit is a big symptom in the corporate world. So you want to understand if there's a trust deficit between the employees and the employer, and we see if both the parties are not on one page, that can lead to the dismissal of the employee, or maybe that can lead to the breakdown in the relationship between the employee and the employer. So yes, trust deficit stems from sort of like mistrust. It starts from suspecting someone, it starts from the doubt, and if we doubt each other and we want to move on with the corporate culture. It's very difficult. So yes, we have to have some kind of mutual trust between us. We must have sort of like sort of a bonding between us where we trust each other. So trust factor comes into play. Technological barrier, as it goes without saying nowadays that technology can be a barrier. And how does it become a barrier? Artificial intelligence is sort of becoming a barrier in many occasions, although it's providing solutions. But people sometimes they don't want to rely upon technology. People see it as a threat, and we understand the connotation. As far as I understand, if I'm not wrong, connotation related to AI is negative by far. By and large, artificial intelligence is viewed as something negative, and of course it has got a lot of benefits, but so far. So technological barrier is another thing, that if you do not have technology, or you have a technology that that's something you don't understand, that can be a barrier. So you want to make sure that you utilize the technology, that doesn't become a barrier. And sometimes we understand technology can be boon and it can be bane. So it can go both the ways. So technological barrier is another thing. And comes multi-time zones. If we talk about call centers, people in call centers, when they're calling, they've got different watches, big clocks on the wall, and each clock is showing them the time zone of different states in America. So if I'm in Pakistan, I'm making a call to India, America, I will have to look at the time zones, and if that time zone is not ready yet, it's a barrier for me because I cannot make call to them. That's a waste of time. So yeah, a call center can be a great example of. And even if you want to do a business with someone who is in other part of the world, and you try and contact them, and they have a different time zone, that can be a barrier. Comes expectations. I always say never elevate the expectations of the customers. Make sure you do not sort of elate or increase their expectation. Make sure that you keep their expectations limited so that they do not ask for more, because that can be a huge barrier. If you create expectation of any of the stakeholders, they will ask for more and more, and they will stop working. So all these things, including technology, which we have discussed, sometimes technology is down, that's a barrier. So all these things are some of the barriers that I have identified, some major barriers. Yes, there can be other barriers as well. Given the fact that we have got advancement in the communication systems, AI is coming, what type of new barriers will come through, that's something remain to be seen. But so far, when we were discussing business communication, and we have covered business communication in terms of channel, that is verbal, non-verbal. Verbal goes with oral and written. Then in terms of style, formal, informal. Then in terms of levels, intrapersonal, interpersonal, intragroup, intergroup, intra-organizational, interorganizational, mass communication. Mass communication has TV, radio, games, internet, and newspapers. And then we discuss communication in terms of environment, internal environment, external environment. So now we have covered the barriers to communication as well. So as a good manager, if you want to have communication events, and you want to make that all your communication efforts that you're making in one day to make all the communication events successful, you must have understanding of these barriers, okay? And you must try and implement all the principles of communication as well to ensure to have an effective and efficient communication. And lastly, you want to make sure that there is communication infrastructure in place, suitable communication infrastructure. So that's all for today. I'll see you with the new lecture in the next video. And meanwhile, you look after yourself. I'll see you then. Thank you so much.